a high-level committee which will probe the irregularities in the conduct of NEET. But we still do not have any further details of who's going to be part of this committee, what the timelines of this committee are going to be. And because for the retest, as far as the 1,560-odd students who got grace marks is concerned, that retest is going to happen this Sunday. And then counselling for all the qualified students, which runs into lakhs, that begins next Sunday. And this committee is yet to hit the ground running. Also, there is no relief by way of the courts that's coming for these students, because the next hearing is on the 8th of July, by which time you would have had a little more than a week of NEET counselling already completed. Meanwhile, today the Congress party took out a nationwide protest, and while the principal opposition party is well within its right to hold the government to account, is it in the best interests of the students who've been affected? Should we not avoid politics on such a sensitive issue which deals with the future of our children, and instead allow the investigation, whether it's in Bihar or in Gujarat or in Haryana, to reach its logical conclusion and apprehend the culprits?
सरकार मेरिटियस विद्यार्थियों के साथ खड़ा है। सरकार विश्वास जन्माना चाहती है कि हम कोई भी गड़बड़ी को टॉलरेट नहीं करेंगे।
राहुल जी ने यही तो कहा, 3 बड़े मुख्य केंद्र हैं घोटाले के, शिक्षा घोटाले के। उत्तर प्रदेश, मध्य प्रदेश और गुजरात, तीनों बीजेपी शासित राज्य हैं।
राज्य में सरकार उनकी, केंद्र में सरकार उनकी, जांच एजेंसियां उनकी। हम ही कहते हैं मुख्यमंत्री जी को बुला ले मेरे साइड को, अरे चाहे पीए हो, पीएस हो, कोई हो, बुला करके पूछताछ कर ले।
All right, let's go straight across to our guests, both political as well as those in the field of education, now joining us. First, Sanju Verma is national spokesperson of the BJP, Salman Sood, spokesperson of the Congress party, Zubin Malhotra is a career coach and counsellor, Professor V. Ram Gopal Rao is Group Vice Chancellor of BITS Pilani and former Director of IIT Delhi. Sanju Verma, the moot point is this: if the reason to cancel UGC-NET was that the question paper was compromised, as the Education Minister said yesterday, even in the case of NEET, it's evident now that the question paper was compromised, whether in Bihar or in Gujarat or in Haryana. Why aren't you cancelling NEET and having a retest?
Zaka, as you started at the start of your show by saying that, there is the case of first 1,563 students who will have to take a retest this Sunday. And these are the 1,563 students who had gotten grace marks. And there was a hue and cry that was unfair to the others who actually, got their marks on the basis of merit. So point number one, the two issues are very different. The UGC-NET is very different from the NEET exam, which was held on the 5th of May this year, a couple of weeks back. Point number two, as far as the NEET exam goes, there is a Supreme Court hearing on the 8th of July. And all the petitions, there are some 14 or 15 odd petitions which will be bunched together and heard simultaneously by the Supreme Court, so that there is no delay on the steps to be taken going forward. So this is basically a case that is sub judice. Point number three, if you look at what Dharmendra Pradhan has been saying over the last 24 or 36 hours, he was asked exactly the same question: if UGC-NET could be cancelled, then why not NEET, which happened on the 5th of May this year? His response is simple, that the two things are completely different. In the case of the NEET exam held on the 5th of May, it is a question of only 1,563 students who have basically complained that why are grace marks being taken away. And there are some who are saying grace marks should not have been given in the first place, because this is being unjust to the others who've not got the benefit of grace marks. So I think you cannot compare apples with oranges. But one thing I'm very sure of, the fact that the interest of the students will not be compromised, be it the NEET exam, be it the UGC-NET exam, and once the Supreme Court takes a decision on the 8th of July, I think the path forward will be much clearer, and you will have greater clarity.
I just want you to clarify this. Are you suggesting that the erroneous part or the errant or deviant part as far as this year's NEET exam is concerned is confined to just this 1,563, that the rest of the 23 or what 23 lakh plus students who took it, there is nothing deviant or erroneous in the manner in which the exam was conducted for them?
There are a couple of things, which are the deviant factors here. Zaka, I'm not going to brush things under the carpet, though this is a political debate, and it would be great to give some political arguments. But let me be, very clear. The first deviant factor is this bunch of 1,563 students who got grace marks. Whether that should have happened or not happened, we will find out, because they are sitting for a retest on the 23rd of this month, that is on Sunday. Point number 2, the deviant factor is that sample papers were available on the dark web and dark net. And this is with respect to the NEET exam. I'm not even talking about the UGC-NET, which Dharmendra Pradhan has admitted to. Apparently, some sample papers were available on social media handles and Telegram channels as well. So there will be a full-fledged probe, and that is precisely the reason that Pradeep Joshi, who currently heads the NTA, he is heading a task force to probe into the fact as to whether the deviant factor was limited to 1,563 students. Was it limited only to the 67 students, all of whom got full marks, 720 out of 720?
Okay.
Was this limited to only a few centers in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Gujarat, or was this a pan-India phenomena? So I think let there be a full-fledged probe, but at this point in time, we are having a retest only for 1,563 students.
Salman Soz, there are two parts to my question. One is it right, is it fair? Yes, you have every right to hold the government to account, hold the NTA to account. After all, the future of students is concerned. But now that there is a high-level panel that's been instituted, inquiries are on in Bihar, in Gujarat, in Haryana, is it right to politicize this further and further, because this is happening at the cost of students, number one. Number two, also to the specific charge that as far as the Bihar part is concerned, there is a gentleman by name Sikandar Yadvendu who seems to be emerging as the mastermind, at least of the Bihar part of this scam. And he has links with a gentleman called Preetam, who happens to be a PS of your ally Tejashwi Yadav. So please respond to both of those.
Zaka, first of all, the real issue in front of us is the future of the young people of this country. This government has basically failed it on all fronts in terms of getting young people jobs, any kind of opportunity. When they go for exams, their papers are leaked. When they go for recruitments, the papers are leaked. When they go for a scheme like Agniveer, basically which curtails their future in the military, this government, the Modi government, this NDA government has created hopelessness for young people in this country. And that's the real issue. That's the real issue. Politics is just a way of representing people. We've been elected, our party's been elected, others have been elected to represent people. Among those people is the future of India, the young people of this country. They're in pain. If they're in pain, should we not speak up? Should we not strengthen their case? They have a legitimate case. 23 to 24 lakh candidates in just one exam are suffering right now because there is no clarity. I know the BJP spokesperson will say that this is about 1,500 cases, this is deviant, that is not deviant. There is some person in Bihar who's responsible for all this stuff. That's not the issue here. The issue is the credibility. The credibility which lies in tatters of the NTA.
Okay.
Of the government which appointed these people onto the NTA. And by the way, people may be interested to find out why these kinds of things are happening. Because we have an unaccountable government, Zaka. You know it. Everybody knows it. Every few days now, we have train accidents and people get killed. And the same minister is brought in again. And there is no accountability and nobody says anything. Now these young people are being affected. If we don't speak up, who's going to speak up? We encourage the young people of this country.
Okay, can you respond to the second question that I
just
asked about
one.
Tejashwi
Yes,
Yadav, and then I need to go to the two career
I will.
counselors? Yes.
I will. I want the young people of this country to just watch this debate and other debates. What you will find on the part of the government and the BJP is basically trying to deflect attention from this very serious issue. They'll say, Bihar mein koi hai, Tejashwi Yadav ke jaan pehchan wale, unhone kiya hai. Nahin. This has been done by Prime Minister Modi by appointing incompetent people to run some of the most critical tests in this country. And this politicization of education, look at all the vice chancellors that they've been appointing, RSS people, BJP people. We need competence. We need expertise. And what you see in front of you, Zaka, is politicization of education that is hurting
let me go across to Zubin Malhotra as well as Dr. Ram Gopal Rao. Zubin Malhotra, prior to NEET, we had a whole bunch of different exams, different institutes had different exams. AIIMS used to have an exam. I know JIPMER used to have an exam. Various medical institutes around the country used to have exams. At last count, I think there were about 20 odd, or maybe even more than that. So no one is arguing against the need to have one centralized test. I agree with the rationale of that. The question is the NTA capable enough of conducting that? As I understand, the NTA is not even a statutory body. It does not have either governmental oversight or even Parliament's oversight. Should not a competent body, a body that has the powers, the financial resources, and of course the human resources of the government to back it, to actually conduct this exam?
The NTA conducts multiple exams, I think at last count close to 24, impacting easily 50 lakh students at various levels for admissions and entrances, right from the future health service professionals of our country to undergraduate admissions to what have you. So if there are gaps and capability gaps and process gaps, which certainly there are, I see no reason why in a country like ours that can produce top-notch both public and private sector organizations, capabilities, educational institutions, that this organization cannot conduct foolproof examinations. There will still be lapses, and at every opportunity that this lapse occurs is an opportunity to improve those lapses and make the system more foolproof. Just another point. The issue with the NEET is not just 1,500 odd students who've been awarded grace marks. If that was so, it's very easy to dial back those grace marks that were awarded.
Yeah.
It's not that they were awarded extra time and so therefore the exam process has been vitiated. If you look at the last 5 years' data, there is huge mark inflation. There are over 67 students who have scored 720 marks, full marks on the paper, which has never happened in the history of the NEET. At every score level, there are students which are in 5 or 10 times the average of the last 5 years who have scored. So simply conducting a retest for a minuscule fraction of those students who are affected is a travesty. It is an injustice to 24 lakh plus students, and it's a travesty to the medical profession because, mind you, these are the students 15-20 years you and I will be going to seek medical health
assistance
and advice. The process should be not just be fair but appear to be fair, and the only way that this can be done is conducting a retest. I don't see why the government can't take a stand in the Supreme Court, and unfortunately now it is sub judice, so it cannot be just a unilateral government decision, that we think that the process has been vitiated, it is not fair to everyone, and we propose that we will conduct a retest with sufficient oversight. If it means that NTA is not the body to do it at this time around, hand it over to the UPSC as a special for just this year.
I was just going to ask Professor Ram Gopal Rao that. It's not like we see exam paper leaks in every competitive exam in this country. UPSC is a great example of how we hardly ever hear of the UPSC paper leaking. Even in the case of IIT JEE, very rarely do you hear of the JEE paper leaking. Even in the case of the IIM exams, what used to be earlier the CAT exam, again, you don't hear of the paper leaking, at least as often as we are hearing with NEET. So is the problem with the agency that's testing it? Is the problem with the private agencies that it employs to at the back end? Or is it the problem of these coaching centers? Where does the problem lie? Because this seems to be particularly endemic in some categories of competitive exams, but not necessarily in all.
Exactly. I think your question itself contains the answer. If government needs to organize this exam, it has to be a UPSC kind of a model, a constitutional body with members, with academicians managing the entire thing and with complete independence. I mean, who gives the grace marks and who decides, how to give those grace marks? In the IIT JEE advanced exam, all 23 IITs, the representatives will sit together across a table, and those decisions are taken by the JEE body, which consists of all these IITs, not by randomly by some bureaucrat thinking something at some point in time. I think this is what needs to be done. If you need a government body to conduct this exam, it has to be a UPSC kind of a body we need to create. And if it is academic institutions, right? Why is it that the JEE advanced exam or even the GATE exam at one point, was 13 lakh students, 14 lakh students, used to take that exam. IITs manage that entire examination entirely on their own. How does it happen? There the faculty members get involved from day one. There is an ownership. I mean, our entire integrity, our entire reputation depends on that examination. From start to finish, from setting the paper to finally conducting the examination and evaluation and all of that, everywhere the IIT faculty are there, day and night, managing that entire examination.
Sanju Verma, I want to bring your attention to the point that Professor Rao made, that the NTA are not a stakeholder in this exam. They are not a bunch of doctors or medical professionals or people, academics involved in the medical field who are a stakeholder in this profession. Earlier, when we used to have the medical tests, AIIMS used to have its own test, JIPMER used to have its own test, other medical colleges used to have its own tests. Today, we have a dozen odd AIIMS in this country. Why can't all of them, doctors, teachers, people who are part of the medical field of these AIIMS, come together? And why not this be a sort of standardized test in which academics / doctors, people in the medical profession are involved, as opposed to an NTA, which, like I said, does not have A, oversight, and B, are not stakeholders. They're not from the medical profession.
Okay, Zaka, first and foremost, I think, Zubin Malhotra, Mr. Chauhan and Professor Rao, they all made some very pertinent points. I will get to the politics of it later on because the Congress panelists made some spurious and reckless allegations. I'll deal with them in a bit. But coming to the more important point, let's be very clear about one thing. The NTA was set up as a society way back under the Societies Registration Act of 1860. But it actually got teeth only when it became an autonomous body as recently as 2017. And it is an autonomous body, albeit not a statutory one, and directly comes under the aegis of the Education Ministry, which is currently headed by Dharmendra Pradhan, no less. So to say that the NTA does not have any oversight by virtue of not being a statutory body, I think that is not completely correct, because the Education Ministry does have, the responsibility and does look at what the NTA is up to or not up to. Point number two, I'm not saying that the NTA has not seen lapses. I mean, that is there for everyone to see. Your audience is smart enough. But are we going to throw the baby along with the bathwater? Because you have every right. And when I say you, I also include myself. I include all the stakeholders. We all have children, who want to get into higher learning. We are not just spokespeople of political parties. We are stakeholders by virtue of being citizens. We are stakeholders by virtue of being bona fide parents. We are stakeholders by virtue of being teachers, students, so on and so forth. But let's be very clear. The NTA has to buckle up. Having said that, don't forget, Zaka, this is one important point that nobody has touched upon. The NTA currently conducts the JEE main exams. It conducts NEET-UG. It conducts GPAT. It conducts CMAT. And it conducts the UGC-NET, which means that in a given year, the NTA conducts competitive entrance examinations for higher education for at least 10 to 12 million students, 1 to 1.2 crore students. And am I saying that, oh, because they conduct exams for 1 to 1.2 crore students, so what if 1,563 cases came about where grace marks were given? So what if 67 students got full 720 out of 720 in the NEET exam? No, every student matters. But having said that, let us not lose sight of a sense of proportion. The NTA needs to be strengthened. The governing body of the NTA needs to have experts and professionals from various fields. But to say that the NTA has not done a half decent job, I think that is something that I will not endorse. And my last point to the Congress spokesperson, when you sit here and give lectures to the BJP, you forget that from 2008 to 2023, in those 15 years, for 10 long years, it was Congress's Ashok Gehlot who was the chief minister in Rajasthan. And in those 10 years, under the incompetent Gehlot dispensation, there were more than 36 leaks, which means more than 3 leaks every single year on an average. And need I remind the Congress panelists that while the BJP will do what it needs to do, how is it that Priyanka Vadra was actually endorsing the case of Ayushi Patel, whom the Delhi High Court found culpable of forgery? And Priyanka Vadra did not have the decency to take down that post on
Salman,
Twitter.
so the larger point being, you know, when an agency conducts tests for anywhere between 10 to 12 million students every single year, in a country as big as ours, as complex as ours, there will be 1 or 2 leaks here and there. And you and your party by no means is above board on this, because just 6 months ago, we saw what happened in Rajasthan. There was a massive paper leak and there were street side protests and so on. So it's not like, you know, Congress-ruled governments have done any greater job or any better a job than what is happening right now.
Zaka, I would basically tell your audience that when they listen to us, when they watch this debate, they should listen more to people like Mr. Malhotra, Mr. Rao, and Mr. Chauhan, because these are the experts who have their best interests in mind. As far as Sanju Verma's or Rajasthan, you guys did these are deflective tactics. These are things which we can just swat away. It's like a fly, you can swat it away. But, you know, if you look at the Vyapam scam in Madhya Pradesh, an ongoing scam that has 50 people were killed who were associated with that scam. Where did it happen? In Madhya Pradesh, ruled by BJP. I don't want to get into that kind of a debate with Sanju Verma, because that is not of interest to the people who are affected by this tragedy right now. The tragedy that has befallen the young people of this country, 23 to 24 lakh kids. This is not about 1,500 people. Again, like Mr. Malhotra also said, this is not about 1,500 people. This is about 23 to 24 lakh people.
Okay.
These people have worked hard for a year, maybe 2 years, preparing for this examination, and this examination's credibility is zero. The credibility is zero. So is the credibility of the National Testing Agency. So is the credibility of Prime Minister Modi's government.
Reckless allegations.
What exactly?
Stop making reckless allegations. Talk about Tejas
Okay.
involvement.
Let me,
Please
one second, let me move away from the political spokespersons for 1 second. Let me bring back Mr. Malhotra and Professor Rao. So, Zubin Malhotra, we have a very difficult situation on hand where you are convinced that the integrity of this exam has been compromised, rank inflation, the number of people getting full marks, 720 that is, and so on, has been completely inflated according to you. But you have a situation where these 1,500 odd kids are going to take the exam this Sunday. The counseling begins from next Sunday, and the court will not hear this matter until the 8th of July. So that's about, 3 weeks from now, by which time already about a week plus days of counseling would have gotten over. At that stage, would it even be practical or feasible to order a retest of the entire 20 odd lakhs who took this test?
In all probability, no, but unfortunately, that's the way things are going. And, the worry is that just like during the lockdown and COVID, you had a moniker which was a COVID batch, this lot of students who are going to get into medical school will be known as the paper leak batch. And that's not a tag, whether in jest or seriousness, that you actually want. Very simple things. I understand today that a review is being conducted into the entire process by the chairman of the body who is supposed to conduct this. I mean, those are simple things that the government can do to try and restore some trust into into this organization and into this test taking process. You cannot have the chairman of the NTA conducting a review into how the NTA has handled this whole exercise. Why cannot an independent body or an agency do this?
Okay.
Now,
I think yesterday's announcement by the minister was that there will be a high-level committee. We don't know the composition of that committee. I would assume that there are outside professional experts who will judge as part of that committee.
Zaka, the point is all of this is trying to affix blame. All of this is trying to. There's also political grandstanding. But are these decisions being taken with 24 lakh NEET aspirants at the center of this thought process? My worry and fear is that it's not.
Professor Rao, if you were to fix this problem, where would you start?
I think it's a very complicated problem to fix right now. But I think we need to understand, I think the time is essence here. I mean, you need to, whatever we decide, we need to decide quickly because children are under stress. They don't know what is happening and what will happen to their careers. I think, one needs to look into the entire process, why there is a grade inflation and or the marks inflation, the rank inflation this year. I think that needs to be understood first. I don't think that is because of these 1,600 students getting a grace marks. I think once we understand why there is a rank inflation this year, once we get to know that, I think many things probably can be understood. For example, in the southern part of India, in the Telugu states, the 2 Telugu states, last year in the NEET exam, there were apparently 3 or 4 students who got full 100% marks. This year also only 3 or 4 students got the full 100% of marks. So what it means is in those 2 states, probably nothing much would have happened, like what happened in the other parts of the country. Okay. Suddenly, some states this year, earlier year there were 3 or 4 toppers, but this year there are suddenly, 60 or 70 toppers. I think that needs to be investigated thoroughly.
I believe in Jhajjar in Haryana, in one examination center, there were 6 students who got 720 out of 720. But we'll leave it at that. I want to give Mr. Chauhan the final word. What then is the solution, Mr. Chauhan? Because ultimately, we've all been saying the future of 23 lakh students is at stake here. Do you just abolish the NTA? Do you get some other body to conduct these exams? Because I keep going back to that point. I agree with the rationale of having one testing agency as opposed to, multiple testing agencies, different institutes having different tests, etc., etc. But how do you then strengthen that agency? Is it NTA itself, or do you think NTA needs to be abolished and some other body should take its place?
I don't know whether abolition of one agency and creating another agency can be the solution. The problem is that we need to find out in the most pedagogic manner that why do we need a centralized examination like NEET? The earlier system was working well, but then if for some reason you need to have centralized examination, then you need to have elaborate system. The first thing that government can do is take the responsibility, not just the administrative responsibility, but also the financial responsibility of an agency. Do you know that the NTA charges 1,600, 1,500 rupees for NET examination and other examination, and it has a mandate that it has to do it on the basis of its earnings. So obviously it end up doing corner cuttings and things like that. It has to be the government responsibility to conduct examination, and government should take financial responsibilities and obviously the administrative one. In nutshell, we need to make the system accountable. Right now the system is not accountable.
I'll end with that note. Right now the system is not accountable. The need of the hour is to make the system accountable. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much to all our guests. I think there were some great ideas that came forth on what is wrong with the current set of examinations, the manner in which it's being conducted, the agency that conducts it, and how to fix accountability therein. We're going to take a quick break. We're coming to you from the Federal Bank in CNN News 18 Primetime Studio. You're watching Brass Tacks. We'll take a quick break. On the other side, I'll be speaking to one of the foremost foreign policy commentators in the world right now, Mr. Fareed Zakaria, and I'm going to ask him about how the world is going to look at Modi 3.0. The Prime Minister was at the G7 last week. He was feted and celebrated. But with this reduced mandate, will the way in which the world perceives and world leaders perceive Mr. Modi and his government, will that necessarily change, or will it be continuity? That exclusive interview right on the other side.
From stomach pain for 3 days, and they didn't expect that it's illicit liquor. And here there are 2 kids here. Unga per enna?
En per Su Raghavan.
Raghavan. His name is Raghavan. How old are you? Evlo vayasu ungalukku?
எனக்கு 14.
He's 14 years old. என்ன நடந்தது அன்னைக்கு நீங்க இங்க இருந்தீங்களா?
நாங்க ஸ்கூலுக்கு போயிட்டு நாங்க 3 பேரும் சாயந்தரம் வந்தோடனே தான் அம்மாவும் அப்பாவும் ஹாஸ்பிட்டல்ல இருக்காங்கன்னாங்க. நியூஸ்ல பார்த்து தான் நாங்களே தெரிஞ்சுக்கிட்டோம் அம்மாவும் அப்பாவும் இறந்தது. அதுக்கப்புறம் நாங்கள் வீடியோ உக்காந்துட்டு இருந்தோம். அதுக்கப்புறம் தான் அம்மா ஆம்புலன்ஸில் அப்பாவும் அம்மாவும் வந்தாங்க.
So they left for school. They didn't know what was happening when they returned from school. He says that he was told that his parents have been taken to hospital. Only after watching news, he realized that it was because of the consumption of illicit liquor, that he was waiting in the hospital throughout the night, and then they brought his mother in an ambulance. They brought the body of his mother back. இது வந்துட்டு இங்க வந்துட்டு கள்ளசாராயம் விற்கிறாங்க. இது புதுசா இல்ல
ஆரம்பத்துலேருந்து வித்துக்கிட்டு இருந்தாங்க. ஆரம்பத்துலேருந்து விற்றுக்கிட்டு இருந்தாங்க. அப்போல்லாம் நிறையா வாட்டி விற்பாங்க. அங்கே தான் விற்கிறாங்க. ஜனங்க நிறைய தேடும் இன்னரெல்லாம் போயிட்டே இருப்பாங்க, வாங்கிட்டு குடிச்சிட்டு இருப்பாங்க. அப்போல்லாம் ஒன்றும் ஆகல. அங்கே தான் வீட்டுக்கிட்டே அவங்க சொந்த இடத்துல அவங்க சொந்த வீட்டிலே விற்றுக்கிட்டு இருக்கிறாங்க. அண்ணனும் தம்பி விற்கிறாங்க. அவங்க விற்கிறாங்க. ஆனால் அவங்க யாரும் போலீஸோ கீழீஸோ வந்து ஒரு கேள்வியும் கேட்கறதில்ல. அவங்க மட்டும் விற்றுக்கிட்டு நல்லா பப்ளிக்காக விற்பாங்க. So
she says that the sale of illicit liquor was done in the open space just here. Every day illicit liquor has been sold for many years, and the police, state government officials, all of them turned a blind eye. It's an open secret that illicit liquor is sold here, and it's not new, and no action has been taken place. It's not banned yet, and they are the ones who are finally suffering. உங்களுக்கு எவ்வளவு வயசு ஆயிருக்கு?
எனக்கு 15 வயசு ஆகுது. பாய்ஸ் ஸ்கூல் தான் படிச்சுட்டு இருந்தேன். நேற்று வந்து பார்த்தா ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸுங்க சொன்னாங்க, ஏதோ உங்கள் வீட்டில் ஏதோ சண்டை, உங்கள் வீட்டில் யாரோ ஹாஸ்பிட்டலில் இருக்காங்களான்னு சொல்லி அப்போ தான் ஸ்கூல்லேருந்து வந்தேன். அங்கே எங்கள் பாட்டிக்கு கடைக்கு பக்கத்தில் இருக்கீங்கன்னு சொன்னாங்க. வீட்டில் அப்பாவுக்கும் அம்மாவுக்கும் உடம்பு சரியில்லாமல் ஹாஸ்பிட்டலில் இருக்காங்களான்னு வந்து வீட்டிலேருந்து கேட்டிருந்தா யாருமே எதுவும் சொல்லவே இல்லை. நியூஸை பார்த்த உடனே தான் தெரிஞ்சு அம்மாவும் அப்பாவும் இறந்து போயிட்டாங்கன்னு. அது நினச்சிட்டு நாங்கள் எதுவும் அழுவில் எதுவும் செய்யலை, அமைதியாக தான் இருந்தோம். மற்றவங்க வந்து எங்கிட்ட அழுவு பேச எங்களுக்கு அழுவு வந்து நாங்களும் எது பண்ணிக்காமல் எங்கள் ஆயா பக்கத்தில் தான் போயிட்டு உக்காந்துக்கிட்டோம். நாங்களும் எதுவும் சொல்ல.
இப்போ உங்களை பார்த்துக்கிறதுக்கு யாராவது இருக்காங்களா? நீங்கள் யாரும் இருக்கீங்க?
யாரும் இல்லை.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the toast of the G7, which happened in Apulia, Italy last week. From Joe Biden to Justin Trudeau to host Giorgia Meloni, everyone wanted to take a selfie with Mr. Modi. The one between Modi and Meloni even broke the internet with memes and hashtags of Melody, which is a combination of Modi and Meloni.
Hello from the Melody team!
But Modi 3.0 is going to face some substantial foreign policy headwinds. There are choppy international waters from the 2 ongoing wars in Ukraine and Gaza, the great power rivalry between the United States and China, and potential flare-ups in the Taiwan Straits or across the South China Sea. Modi 3.0 will have to deftly deal with these stupendous challenges. So how will the world view Modi 3.0? Will the Prime Minister be celebrated just like he was in his first 2 terms as the strongman leader of the world's largest democracy? Or will his reduced mandate make his image a bit more chastened in the eyes of world leaders? The West did voice particular concerns about human rights and the trampling of institutions under the first 2 terms of Mr. Modi. Will his reduced mandate curb the majoritarian instincts of his party, the BJP? The first big foreign policy challenge for the Modi government is navigating the Russia-Ukraine war. Just last week, after the G7 concluded, there was a peace summit that was organized by and in Switzerland. Around 80 countries from around the world attended, including India. But when it came to the final declaration, which would call for a ceasefire as well as greater humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, India stood out like a sore thumb. India refused to sign the final declaration, insisting that any declaration which does not have the participation of Russia would be meaningless. In fact, India has taken a different position from its Western partners when it comes to Russia and this ongoing war in Ukraine. India refused to vote in any of the UN resolutions condemning Russia's actions. It has continued to buy Russian oil. In fact, Russia has replaced traditional Indian oil suppliers in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia and Iran as India's biggest supplier of oil. At one point in these last couple of years since this war began, a quarter of all of India's oil imports were coming from Russia, much to the chagrin of its Western partners like America. The other war has also been equally divisive, the one between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. After the October 7th attacks, India was one of the first countries to come out and unequivocally support Israel and condemn the Hamas terror attack in no uncertain terms. But as this war has progressed, most of Israel's supporters, including India, have come under immense pressure to rein in Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Modi even sent his national security advisor Ajit Doval to Tel Aviv with a proposal to halt the fighting during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. While Israel was initially open to the idea, it didn't come to pass. The fighting continued, and now more than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed in the last 8 months of this war. There is also big concern of great power competition between the United States and China. Just this past week, there have been tensions with the visit of a US congressional delegation in India meeting with the Tibetan spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. China took grave exception to the visit, asking the United States not to use India as a conduit to get back at Beijing. On the same day, the US State Department also approved another $360 million of weapons to Taiwan. The delegation was led by former US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who incidentally also led a delegation to Taiwan 2 years ago, which led to a flare-up between Washington and Beijing. India has its own ongoing border standoff with China. The military-to-military confrontation has lasted for the last 4 years now, since the Galwan clashes at the line of actual control, in which 20 Indian soldiers died and dozens of Chinese PLO soldiers were also killed. An undemarcated but non-militarized border has now effectively been militarized. India now has 2 active and hot borders, one with Pakistan, the other with China. Modi 3.0 will also have to deal with the Khalistan issue, which seems to have emerged as a thorn in its relationship with its Western partners, the US, UK, Canada, and now Australia. It started with the killing of a Khalistani terrorist, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, on Canadian soil. That was followed with the plot to kill another Khalistani separatist, Gurpantwan Singh Pannu, in the United States, who openly keeps issuing threats against India.
Observe a moment of silence in memory of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, assassinated in Surrey, British Columbia, 1 year ago today. I now invite honourable members to rise.
Just this week, the entire Canadian Parliament stood up for a minute's silence on the anniversary of Nijjar's killing, overlooking the grave acts of terrorism that he was accused of. India will have to do more in Mr. Modi's third term to convince its Western partners that the Khalistan issue threatens the very sovereignty of a friendly country, and that open encouragement to such acts of incitement by the West and in the West must be curtailed. Given this lay of the foreign policy land, as it were, how will the world perceive Modi 3.0? Will the fundamental interest of the West, which is to prop up India as a counterweight to China, override some of these niggling temporal issues? We'll find out. All right, so Narendra Modi 3.0 is here in office. It is, of course, at the head of a coalition government with a reduced majority. But nonetheless, Mr. Modi becomes the first Prime Minister after Jawaharlal Nehru to get a consecutive third term. How may the world view him differently, or is it going to be the same as they did over the last 10 years? And how may India in this third term view the challenges that the world will throw at it in the next 5 years? Joining us now is one of the world's foremost foreign policy commentators, the host of Fareed Zakaria GPS on CNN, and the author of the latest book, The Age of Revolution. Fareed Zakaria, thank you very much for speaking with us here on CNN.
My pleasure, Zaka.
So let me start with, when the results came on the 4th of June and the seat count of Mr. Modi's party was reduced by 60 odd and the NDA alliance was reduced substantially from what they were predicting, what they were hoping, what was your first reaction? What was going through your mind when you saw those results? Because no one was quite prepared for that.
I think more than anything else, it gave me an enormous sense of pride and confidence in Indian democracy, in the sense that whatever, and this is honestly true, regardless of what you think of Narendra Modi and his policies, but the idea that a sitting prime minister who is enormously popular, who uses his governmental power to promulgate his image, who has outspent the opposition by God knows 10 to 1, maybe more, was chastened by this vast public, many of them poor, many of them illiterate. It just gave you a sense that Indian voters have the strength, the capacity, the power to look through, see through propaganda, see through money that's spent. And in a sense, they were voting for checks and balances, for limitations on authority. I wouldn't overread the election. I don't know what it says about Hindutva, and we can get into that. But what they were really saying is, let's have a little more balance in the system. And I think that's admirable. And frankly, it's extraordinary to see this coming from India's electorate, this reassertion of kind of liberal democracy and checks and balances. Well, you weren't seeing it from India's elite. You weren't seeing this. These people have had more courage than a lot of the people I know in India's most gilded drawing rooms.
I do want to ask you, yes, you're absolutely right. It's a message loud and clear to the incumbent. They perhaps want a chastened government, a government with checks and balances. But all said and done, it's been 2 weeks now since those results came. Mr. Modi is very much in the saddle. He's got a third straight term, the first Prime Minister ever in India to equal that record of Jawaharlal Nehru. How would you read that milestone, though?
It's important, which is why I say I wouldn't overread it. Modi is an enormously important figure in Indian history. He is, as I've said, the most important prime minister probably since Nehru, and you can't take that away from him. That the accomplishment is real, but in a sense we are returning to a more normal post-Nehruvian politics in India, which is to say, once the Congress party lost its dominance, its kind of extraordinary dominance of Indian politics in the 1970s. Since then, we have really had mostly coalition governments, right? If you look after the emergency, after the rise of the Janata Dal, what you have had is coalition governments, except on 3 occasions. After the death of Indira Gandhi, because of the sympathy wave, after the death of Rajiv Gandhi, because of a sympathy wave, and Modi. So, in a sense, what it seems like is what the new norm, the new normal of Indian politics for 50 years has been coalition governments, and we are returning to that, and that Modi was able to bend the curve but not break it.
I know you did say earlier on that you don't want to read too much into the Hindutva aspect, but I do want to ask you, because Mr. Modi's first 2 terms, both in 14 and in 19, were built on winning big in the biggest state in the country, in Uttar Pradesh. But the fact that his party has lost half the seats that it won last time, this time around, and more importantly, It lost in Ayodhya, where the Ram temple was built, and they were hoping to ride on the frenzy of the inauguration of the Ram temple. What does that tell you?
I'm trying to think this through, Zaka, and the reason I say I don't want to read too much into it is because I need to read more, analyze more, talk to more people. I think honestly, it's not entirely clear to me that this vote was some kind of a resounding rejection. I myself feel like the Hindutva is an overdone weaponization of a religion which I don't think is appropriate. So I would like to believe that the public is rejecting it. But, you know, look, the BJP's vote share was still 37%, which is roughly what it's been before. The opposition got its act together and forced a one-on-one contest in many places, or close to one-on-one. So the anti-BJP vote didn't get fragmented as it had in the last two elections. They did, in fact, do well in other places. As you say, UP is, UP, Maharashtra, and the South are the kind of the places where they didn't do well. So I need to understand it a little bit better. And I think in UP there was the kind of split between Amit Shah and Yogi. So how much of that were tactical issues? I would like to believe that that Indians understand that Hinduism is a deeply tolerant, pluralistic religion that celebrates diversity, that does not lend itself to be weaponized into a kind of martial religion that is, persecuting minorities. I don't know. I think that we need a little more evidence to be sure.
I do want to ask you, the opposition's been saying, Mr. Modi has never run a coalition government, either as his time as chief minister in Gujarat for the 10 plus years that he was there, or as prime minister in the last 10 years. So they're saying that he won't be able to, manage the pulls and pressures of a coalition government, and therefore this government will not survive. Do you buy that?
He's a very shrewd, smart politician. And if you're betting, you'd have to bet that he'll figure out a way to make it work. It is true, it goes against his DNA. He's a very autocratic, authoritarian type. I mean that even within the BJP. I mean, if you look at it's ironic, you have the complete transformation of roles. The Congress party used to be thought of as a court, highly centralized, kind of dynastic, and the BJP was more of a grassroots organization powered by, the people, at the bottom, the cadres. Right now, the BJP has turned into a super court, with decisions really coming all the way from the top. And the Congress has actually managed this coalition of its almost a kind of coalition of equals very well. So it may well be that he has more trouble than we might expect. He's a smart guy. He's going to figure out, I think, how to do it. But it does go against his DNA.
I do want to ask you what this verdict means for the challenger on the other side, Rahul Gandhi. For all practical purposes, the leader of the Congress party. Incidentally, Wednesday this week was his birthday. He turned 54. He's been in active politics for the last 20 years. And for much of that time, he's been sort of lampooned. He's not been taken seriously, particularly by the BJP. Do you think this election has settled that debate, that Rahul Gandhi is not just a serious politician, he's perhaps the numero uno challenger to Mr. Modi?
I think so. I think Rahul Gandhi has matured enormously in the last 5 or 6 years, maybe the last 10 years. And I think you see in him a kind of weightiness, experience. You see somebody who I really do think has gained enormously from traveling the country and meeting with people. And you see an enormous amount of empathy when he talks about people, and he talks about people who are really excluded, marginalized. I frankly think it's commendable that there would be so much focus on, people forget, but India still has hundreds of millions of people who feel very left out of this picture of kind of a glittering, shining India. And to be reaching out to them, to be their voice, to be the voice for vulnerable people, it's very commendable. He's doing it well. He will have to continue to manage this coalition very skillfully, because I don't think the Congress is going to be able to make kind of come back on its own as a majority party. But that too he seems to be handling very well. So I think, yeah, the simple answer to your question is, yeah, I think he is he's the leader of the opposition in every sense of the word.
I do want to ask you about a couple of foreign policy questions. Mr. Modi was at the G7 last week in Italy. He seemed to be the toast of that summit. How does this mandate, he's got 60 seats less than last time, how may that change the way the US, Canada, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the way they view him, the way they viewed him over these last 10 years, would that necessarily change because of this diminished mandate?
No, it won't. First of all, there are many of them are in coalition governments themselves. But more importantly, look, the United States and the Western world in general have made a strategic decision to try to move closer to India over the last 20 years. I mean, the pivotal moment is really under George W. Bush and Manmohan Singh with the nuclear deal. That marked the real sea change. Ever since then, every administration has been trying to deepen the relationship with India, work better with New Delhi. And that won't change at all. The fact that he has to preside over a coalition government won't really change that. There are larger issues of whether or not India wants to participate as fully in that kind of an alliance. But from the point of view of Washington and Western capitals, they have made a strategic structural decision, largely because of the rise of China, but for other reasons as well, the end of the Cold War, the end of of putting India in that camp. And for those structural reasons are really the overwhelming motor for the better relations between the West and India. And that was true before Narendra Modi, it'll be true after him. And so being the head of a coalition versus heading up the BJP alone, it's not really that important.
I do agree with you 100% when you say for structural reasons, surely the West will continue to be on India's right side and India will be on the right side of the West. But there are niggling issues as well, whether it's India's slightly different stand on the Ukraine war, continued purchases of Russian oil, even on Israel-Hamas. India was one of the first countries to come out and pretty unequivocally condemn the terrorist attack. And now increasingly, you have this whole wedge around the Khalistan issue. How much do you see that becoming a problem in Mr. Modi's third term?
There are some of these issues. Some of them, by the way, have been navigated quite well. The issue of India buying Russian oil has not been a big problem. Washington has been very understanding of it. When I've traveled to Ukraine, I've found them to be more upset, and I've had to explain to them that if the Indians didn't buy Russian oil, the price of oil would go to 200, there'd be a recession in the West, and they would lose a lot of Western support. So, it's more, Washington has actually understood that. The Khalistan issue, honestly, Washington is sort of puzzled as to why a government as important and sophisticated as India's would be doing this kind of thing. That has been what I notice is officials in Washington are more puzzled and bewildered and stumped as to what is going on, and what they feel it's an issue that can be managed because it's not a first order issue. It is, as you put it, a niggling issue, and they will handle it. But it has led people to wonder. There seems to be a kind of obsession that is unworthy of a great country like India, and so they've been trying to kind of figure it out, and hiring hit squads in foreign capitals to do this kind of thing is not exactly what that's not been a large part of India's history. So why are they doing it now? There is puzzlement about that, but it's not a first order issue.
And one final word, of course, I guess the first order issue, whether it's for India or for the United States, is this great power competition with China. In India's case, it's more proximate because there's an ongoing border situation for the better part of the last 4 years. And this week, we've had a U.S. congressional delegation led by former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, meeting with the Dalai Lama. China, of course, has said not so particularly charitable things about it. How do you see that playing out in Mr. Modi's third term?
Well, what's interesting to me about all of that is the Chinese have really made very few overtures to Modi. If you go back to the beginning of Modi's term in office, Modi was very I wouldn't call him pro-Chinese, but he was encouraging of the relationship, wanted to deepen the relationship, put a lot of time into it, and that was at the heart of his kind of multi-aligned policy. The Chinese did not return the favor, and in fact, in many ways, it reminds me of the fate that befell Jawaharlal Nehru when he talked about Hindu Chini Bhai Bhai, and then the Chinese invaded in 1962. So what you're seeing is a China that, for whatever reason, has a kind of adversarial relationship with India. Look, China has had 16 border disputes with its neighbors. It has largely solved 15 of them. The one country with whom it has not solved its border dispute or tried even seriously to address it is India. So there's something going on there where on the Chinese side, there is less desire for this kind of better relations. So that leaves India, in my opinion, it should leave India thinking, where should we put our bets? Where should we, place ourselves? And I think it would be much better for India to have a deep strategic, economic, technological, military relationship with the West. I think it's drifting in that direction. I think it could be more proactive and aggressive in moving in that direction and reap enormous benefits for the average Indian person. A much deeper, stronger technological and economic relationship with the U.S. would do more to boost Indian growth than almost anything else.
All right, Fareed Zakaria, the host of GPS on CNN and now the author of the latest book, Age of Revolutions. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. Thank you.
யாருமே இல்லை. இவங்களும் வயசானவங்க, அவங்க பாட்டி, அவங்களும் வயசானவங்க, அவங்களுக்கும் கணவன் இல்லை, இவங்களுக்கும் இல்லை. ஒரு பொண்ணு இருக்குது, ஒரு பொண்ணு, 2 பசங்க தான் இருக்காங்க. யாரும் இல்லை, இவங்களை பார்த்துக்கிறதுக்குன்னு யாரும் இல்லை, படிக்க வைக்கிறதுக்குன்னு யாரும் இல்லை. 2 பசங்க.
They've lost the breadwinner of the family. They've lost their parents. There's no one else for them. There are 2 grandmothers, the father's mother and the mother's mother. Only they are there. But now they ask who's going to pay for the rent, who's going to pay for their children education. They had 3 children, all of them in 9th, 10th and 11th grade. Who's going to help educate them, spend for their education, spend for the rent here? They have no one except for the 2 grandmothers who are there on either side. Very, very tragic incident. Many people have lost their loved ones, and here many breadwinners have died because of the consumption of illicit liquor, and for them life has totally changed over the last 24 hours. Very tragic incident, and they continue to mourn the death of their loved ones.
எவ்வளோ வருஷமா இது நிறைய வருஷமா வித்துட்டு இருக்காங்களா இல்லை எப்படி?
வித்துட்டு தாங்க. நான் அப்பெல்லாம் ஒன்றும் இதுமாரி ஆகலைங்க.
பல வருஷமா வித்துட்டு இருக்காங்க.
இப்பெல்லாம் ஒன்றும் ஆகலைங்க. எல்லாமே சாப்பிட்டாங்கங்க. வேலைக்கு போகிறவங்களும் சாப்பிட்டு போனாங்க, வீட்டில் இருக்கிறவங்களும் சாப்பிட்டாங்க. ஒன்றும் ஆகலைங்க.
எவ்வளோ வருஷமா வித்துட்டு இருக்காங்க?
1 வருஷமா வித்துட்டு.
3 வருஷமா?
1
வருஷமா வித்துட்டு இருக்காங்க. இதே இடத்துல உங்கள் வீட்டில் தான்?
வீட்டில் விற்கிறதில்ல, காட்டை பக்கம் விற்றுட்டு வந்து வீட்டில் இருப்பாங்க.
இங்கே வித்துட்டு இருப்பாங்களா?
இங்கெல்லாம் விற்க மாட்டாங்க.
இது போலீஸ்க்கெலாம் தெரியுமா?
என் மாமா போய் சரண்டர் ஆகிட்டா.
எப்போ?
நேற்றுக்கே இதுமாரி ஆணிச்சு அவங்க ஃபுல்லாக போயிட்டாங்க சார்.
இல்லை, இதுக்கு முன்னாடி 1 வருஷமாக விற்கிற போது போலீஸ்க்கு மாட்டிருக்காங்களா? போலீஸ்க்கு தெரியுமா உங்கள் பையன் விற்கிறது?
அது எனக்கு தெரியாது. என்கிட்ட சொல்கிறேன். அங்கேயே நடந்துக்குதுங்க. காசு நடத்துல அவனு என்ன பண்ணானுங்களோ தெரியல.
So she is the mother of one suspect who was arrested, who was carrying 200 liters of illegal arak, and people here say that, the mother herself admits that for the last 1 year he's been selling illicit liquor, and this time also while he was selling, it's just that some poison was mixed. That's the word that's coming in. Her son was arrested yesterday, and they stay in the same locality. Many of them have lost their loved ones. She, for instance, has lost her brother and sister and brother-in-law, and many say that I have in fact questioned the mother, saying that had he not sold illicit liquor, then the entire community could have lived a better life, because every house here in this locality is impacted. The breadwinner of most of the residents have died because of the consumption.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's International Yoga Day. I'm sure you've seen the pictures and social media hashtags and posts and WhatsApp forwards. It's truly a global celebration. But what does it mean for India? How does yoga boost India's soft power, and what can New Delhi do to build on it? We'll discuss that tonight. Also, India's Tibet policy. Is it being recalibrated? Prime Minister Modi has hosted the US delegation that just met the Dalai Lama. In China, Xi Jinping is visiting a Tibetan school and temple. Meanwhile, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is in India for the second time in 2 weeks. We'll tell you what's on the agenda. Will China use nukes against Taiwan? The Americans asked them. We'll tell you what their response was. How Putin's visit to Asia has rattled American allies in the region. Is Israel heading into a war with the Hezbollah? Can it afford a two-front war? What is